Welcome, one and all, to another session of Stelmo's Rants and Raves. I'm Stelmo. Let's just jump in there. In Iran, the fiasco continues. You know, the problem I have is there have been so many, what I'm going to call Republican pundits, who have warned the president about dealing with the Iranian regime. And yet the president continues to do it. And I understand. I think the other day he let slip that, he's trying to avoid this Great Depression that the whole world is going into because he's got to end it and get the Strait of Hormuz open. Well, I believe that the only way effectively that that's going to happen in any period of time is to finish the battle and do away with the IRGC. That will seal President Trump's, uh, it will seal the way people look at him for generations to come. And he will be looked at very positively. But the way things are going, it's going to be a complete 180. Because yes, I understand that the economies around the world are collapsing. But that was something that predated the start of the Iran war. And there were some people who speculated out there that the reason that they were creating this war is to spend a lot of money to get the GDP up. I didn't buy that. I understand that, yeah, it is a possibility. Uh, but, and I'm not going to spend too much time today on this subject, but, and I'll keep repeating what the problem is here. I see two big problems. Problem number one is the situation between Israel and Lebanon. Now, inside Lebanon is a terrorist organization called Hezbollah. And Hezbollah keeps firing rockets at Israel. So we can say that they're the antagonizing force. And of course, Israel rightfully doesn't like having rockets fired into its territory from Lebanon. And keep in mind, the Lebanese and the Israelis have entered into previous agreements, and the Lebanese were supposed to dismantle Hezbollah. They chose not to do it. Well, that's not the Israelis' fault. It's the Lebanese fault. And again, Israel keeps getting attacked. And so, of course, they're going to respond because the primary function of any government is to protect their people. And that seems to have gotten lost on politicians all around the world. And, I think people are starting to wake up. And you're going to have situations like there was in Ireland where the people were actually torching the homes where these immigrants were at because of the crime that these immigrants are being able to commit, and they're given carte blanche. They can just do whatever it is apparently that they want to do, and the people aren't going to tolerate that. But so the problem is the president understanding that Hezbollah is the problem decided, well, I'm not going to include them in the peace negotiations. So it's a sham, Mr. President, and anybody with any intelligence can see it's a sham. And of course, Hezbollah said, look, we're not involved in this peace treaty. We're not going to follow it. We're not a party to it. And so they keep firing rockets at Israel, and you get mad at Israel when Israel responds because you want a peace deal. That's crazy. It's bizarre. I can't understand it, Mr. President. You have changed. And I think more and more people are starting to wake up that you changed. I see this well, before I get into that other headline, let me, the situation with Iran mirrors the problem with Lebanon. The problem is the IRGC. And so the president decided, look, these people are the problem, so we just won't have them a party to this peace deal. But they're the ones with all the weapons, Mr. President. This council that you're dealing with, they don't have the weapons. Now, I listen to 2CTV. I recommend anybody, if they really want to get the lowdown on what really is happening, that 2CTV is the place. And I know that there are a lot of people that don't like Meyer Tusi because he is telling the truth. And let me, I know I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. Meyer was born in Iran, and he fled Iran with his mother when I believe he was 14 years old. So he certainly speaks the language. His father still lives in Tehran, and he's got numerous family members across the country. And I stumbled onto him very early on in the protests, long before you started hearing anything in the mainstream media. And he provides, and let me say, it's not like he's just talking. He's providing the four corner documents and the video clips and everything else to substantiate what he's saying. And that's why, since this has happened, he's picked up 1 million new subscribers. And when you can pick up 1 million subscribers on YouTube, you know you're doing something right. And so the IRGC, and I can't say, nor can anyone else say, when you deal with these fairly high-ranking IRGC officers, are they the ultimate word or not? Nobody knows, because everything is in disarray because of the massive losses that they have suffered from the bombing campaign. But the IRGC says, yeah, they want the money. They need the money to reconstitute Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. So, and I know all the Republican pundits are out there saying that this Iranian deal is like one of the best things ever to happen. Let me tell you, it's a surrender, and everyone in the public is waking up to that. And there's nothing you can do, about that, because it is what it is. You can't be giving these people $300 billion. And I get irate because who are the signatories of this document? They're the United States and Iran. So the United States is saying that these Gulf nations are going to pony up the money for this $300 billion. But guess what? They haven't agreed to that. They haven't signed on the dotted line. Who signed on the dotted line? The Americans. And I mean, this is like fundamental, basic contract law. You have the parties, they agree to it. And you can't bind. See, I think the president may be getting, I hate to say, too big for his britches, but, you know, I know that there have been some animated conversations between him and Benjamin Netanyahu. And the reason is because Benjamin Netanyahu rightfully is protecting his people. That was one of the main reasons why Donald Trump went into Iran, is because these people have been saying for ages death to America, and they were developing weapons that could give them the ability to kill large parts of our population. And everybody who's against this war really needs to look into the facts behind it. These are religious quacks, okay? These are religious zealots. And they believe God is on their side and God is ultimately going to lead them to victory. And they believe that Islam should be the one and only religion in the world, and that everyone that is not Islamic should be given the two options. One option is you convert to Islam, or the second option is you get on a gurney and you get in line to meet the mortician, because that's how it operates. And it's a shame that that's what I have to say, couch it in those terms in order not to get the censor from saying, oh no, we're not going to let this video out when you're describing what actually will happen. And there's plenty of historical context for this, but I know people don't like history. They don't read history. And they always think that, well, this time around it's going to be a little different. I don't think it's going to be any different. So let me move on now to this. Let me close this part by saying this. There's not going to be any long-term peace here. And all the president is doing, he's looking at the negative features. but those negative features are not going to go away, and it's going to keep dragging on up until and probably past the midterms. And now I'm finally starting to see some Republican pundits come out and say that, yeah, the big problem was when the president decided he was going to have a ceasefire. He should have finished the job. I know he was terrified of putting any boots on the ground. I get it. Well, you should have understood that from the beginning. And if you didn't, then you need to fire Hegseth, because it's just a horrible situation. Anyway, I see this headline here on the Liberty Daily. It says Stephen Miller reveals President Trump is going full 2024 mode on the midterms to surge GOP turnout. Good luck, Mr. President. Yeah, Mr. President, here's the problem you have, okay? When you ran for office your first term, you made a lot of campaign promises. And once you were elected, the, the public was able to see that you actually meant these things. And if you didn't actually get them implemented, we could see that it wasn't for lack of trying on your half, that someone else, whether it be Congress, the courts, or whatever, was the one who prevented you from getting a few of the things through. But this time around, Mr. President, it's completely different. And the gaslighting from our government is just, it's terrible. And it's going to affect the midterms. I believe honesty is your best policy. I think a long time ago you should have said that there are problems with the economy because you inherited all this. This goes from Biden. But the problem is you took credit for the phony good numbers that were put out by the BLS, and you ran with it. Of course, then you found out that, hey, these things get revised and it's not like what I thought. But you bought it, and you should have not bought it. So I think that people like, well, certainly, let's just use one example here. Lutnick, he should go. He should go because of his involvement in the Epstein files. The fact that you kept him on when he is so prominently doing business with Epstein shows that you also support a multi-level legal system. And this country can't survive with that. It was horrible, Mr. President, how they tried to put you in prison, knowing you did not commit a crime. But it's a stark reality. So, you can go out there on the campaign trail, and it may motivate some people. But I believe that there's a lot of lethargic people on the right. Yeah, I think that a lot of them are going to sit home saying, does it really matter anymore? People were expecting to see arrests, Mr. President. Now, I know that you're supposed to be independent from your DOJ, but you need to be calling them in, Mr. President, and say, we need arrest. See, I'm going to repeat myself again. I think making another nomination for Attorney General was a mistake. You should have went with the acting for at least maybe a year or something. Because once they have the job, that's when they become a possible participant in accepting, let's say, large sums of illegal money. I think that's what happened with Pam Bondi. I have no proof of that, obviously. But, I mean, I live in Florida. Pam Bondi was the Attorney General here. She was really good Attorney General. Jeff Sessions was really good in Alabama. He was a law and order guy. They both turned out to be less than stellar. And that's because so much money is involved. And these people, what they see is, hey, this is as high as I think I'm ever going to be able to get. So let me cash out. I mean, it's certainly what the Democrats do, all of them. But where are the arrests? Where are the arrests of the politicians? Nobody is being called to account for the atrocious things that we have found out have been occurring in this country. We got so many limping, lethargic, leftist loons out there. And yeah, you know what? they're starting to get more and more power. And why is that? It's because the economy is falling apart. It started falling apart under Biden, and it's just progressed under Donald Trump. And if Donald Trump would have had decent advisors who would have given him the warnings and say, hey, Mr. President, go down, don't go into this rabbit hole, because in the long run, it's going to cost you so much. But anyway, it happened. And I want to find this other headline here. Uh, so it says here, let me see. Jared Kushner in Switzerland, Steve Witkoff en route for delayed Iran talks. Well, you know what? Yeah, I know you keep screaming and yelling at Bibi. I get it, Mr. President. You want a peace deal no matter what. You don't care what the terms of surrender are, because you now understand where the economy is and where it's going and where it's heading. And it seems to me that the only rational, plausible way to work our way out of this is to open up the Strait of Hormuz permanently, take the IRGC out of the equation. Instead, you've chosen surrender, and it's going to cost you. How much in the midterms? I can't say, because I think there's a lot of things that have cost you to lose voters, Mr. President. Let's start with the big one, the Epstein files. Nobody believes for a second that the complete Epstein files have been released. And let me say in this regard, you know what? Congress took it upon themselves to pass a law to release the Epstein files that the DOJ had. You know what Congress hasn't done yet? They haven't passed a like law to open up the Epstein files that are held by the CIA. They haven't passed a law to open up the Epstein files that are held by the Treasury. And apparently, from what I'm able to gather, the way it works is whichever agency starts an investigation in something, or involved in a situation, they're the genesis of it, and they keep all of the paperwork and evidence, or whatever is involved in that situation. So there's plenty more Epstein information out there. And the situation with Epstein is crimes against children, and that generates a terrible response. And in this regard, the people in the UK are much more outraged over what was released in the Epstein files than apparently Americans are. And that's a sad situation. But so I think you've lost some voters over Epstein. And then you said you're going to open up Fort Knox and show everybody that the gold really is there. Maybe I should share my story about gold, because I do have I think it's interesting. I don't know if anyone else will, but when I was in the Army, I was one of the places I was stationed was Fort Dix, New Jersey, and I was an MP. And at that time, I was in the 511th MP Company, and we got tasked. I think I went maybe 4 or 5 times, perhaps a half dozen. I don't remember exactly, but we were called to do a mission, and the mission would be at West Point, New York. And so we would go up there, and they would put us all up, give us all rooms and everything, and we would have to wait for a call. And of course, we knew the call would come at some point, but because of operational security, we weren't allowed privy until the last minute. And when we were called, what we were there to do is do an outer perimeter security around what was then the U.S. Mint at West Point. And the reason that they put us there is they were bringing in the gold that was in the vaults from Federal Bank in New York. What we were told is that the weight was causing the vault to start to sink, and there was no viable way to solve this. So they had to get all of the gold out of New York and into it would still stay in New York, but from New York City to West Point. And this was really fascinating to watch because it was the first time in my life that I actually saw armored tractor trailers. And I assume because I saw all of those gun holes in the trailer part that there were agents there. But each tractor trailer had four New York State police cars with four officers in each car. And there was four in the front and four in the back and a Cobra gunship over each truck flying. And they were bringing, I think there were six was the number of trucks that were brought each time, but only five of them were full. One was left empty in case of any problem along the road. And it's just fascinating to watch. And I often wondered, because what does a mint do? A mint sells precious metal coins. And some of these coins are legal tender, and some of them are just non-legal tender, but they have their value in the precious metal that they are pressed with. So, I often wondered to myself, you know, what happened to that gold? I don't know. Did the mint use that gold and sell it? It's a possibility. But now I talk, you know, what I'm able to gather is they still have allegedly a bunch of gold in New York, which, all right, technology changes over a number of decades. So maybe they found a way to shore up this vault and they were able to put some of the gold back, or they just knew gold. I don't know. But I am suspicious when we see all the corruption that has been uncovered. And the reason it's been uncovered is because of social media, really, and amateurs going out there and exposing what the government has done or hasn't done, because it's a little bit of both. And now you got everybody trying to jump on the bandwagon. Oh, we're going to get on the fraud. But we don't hear any of the major players being arrested. It's only the little guys. And even with the little guys, there are so many of them. I'm sick and tired of hearing Tom Homan come out and warn people that if you interfere with ICE, you're going to be charged. But yet, Mr. Homan, we see people on video. There's so much video available. We see people interfering and nothing happens to them. So it becomes an empty promise. And when you start with empty promises, they're not going anywhere. So, the Republicans are the only viable option in any election, as far as I'm concerned. But the voters are going to have to, right now this country is on the verge of collapse, and I think it may well collapse. But the only way possible that I see that it could get saved is the voters have to really wake up, start paying attention, because if they don't pay attention, they're not going to like what they end up with. And when they end up with what may be coming, they're not going to then have an option to change it. Because when a socialist consolidates their power and takes over a country, we all know what happens. The lines to the morticians increase dramatically because they know that they're going to have serious opposition because their policies are not liked ultimately down the road. Yeah, initially they start off fine, but eventually they run out, as Maggie Thatcher said, sooner or later they run out of other people's money to take, and so that's when it all starts to fall apart. And because under socialism everybody gets the same amount whether they work or not, most people decide to do as little work as possible, and that's what causes all of these places to collapse and fall apart. And if Americans want that, so be it. They're going to lose all of their precious rights and freedoms. I've lived all my life, and I can say I was free most of it. Only recently do I see where there's a lot of this woke nonsense going on, which affects our daily lives and is pathetic. But and for a lot of this stuff, I blame the Republican Party because, look, one of the problems that the president has is he is the ultimate one in charge, and he gets blamed for a lot of stuff that's really Congress's fault. But we've had a do-nothing Senate and a do-nothing House since they have taken over power this cycle since you come into power. And the people see this. And so, I mean, I hope people understand that the Democrats aren't the answer. But I know in all of these major cities, because, not only were the BLS employment numbers phony, but the BLS inflation numbers are phony. Nobody believes that nonsense, at least nobody who goes out and goes shopping. And so more and more of these poor people, they're running into a brick wall and they have no means to acquire any more money than they're getting. And so socialism is a good thing to them because it's giving them free stuff. And when you have little to no stuff, free stuff sounds great. And so the socialist movement is going to continue to grow in this country. And I don't see a politician, one, in either party really addressing that issue. Well, one party is the Democrat Socialist Party of America, which likes to call itself the Democrat Party, but the Democratic Party fell apart years ago. And it started with what they call Reagan Democrats. And since that time, the more looniness that went to the party, the less people they had. And the only way that they can move forward is to steal elections. And beware, because even with all of the attention on this matter, just look at what just happened in California. And we know that the mayoral election in California was stolen. And people got to wake up soon enough and start demanding, because otherwise they're going to be stuck with something they are going to be terrified of. But all the writing's on the wall. It's all up to the people. And I think I've raved enough today but I'm really frustrated with what's going on, and I think many other people are as well. Anyway, with that, I'm going to wish you all a good day. Stay safe. It's a crazy world out there. It gets crazy by the day. Bye-bye.